First Kingdom of Men. Volume 2. Written by Eloban Chemnicher. Narrated by Aaron Johnson. Chapter 22. The Bridge That Unites Men. Cain's return to Eden brought a sudden calm to the colony. The warring factions all returned to their rightful places, knowing that the true leader of Eden had returned. I couldn't tell if it was out of love or fear for Cain, or maybe it was a bit of both, but everyone was suddenly subdued by his presence. Not a whisper of emancipation from the villages or claims by anyone to be leader of Eden was heard. On his part, Cain did not react to the past incidents and conflict that had disrupted life in Eden while he was away. He remained in seclusion in the fifth village for several days, and he allowed Seth to continue on as leader of the fifth village. Medora remained head of the assembly, and even though he had told me it was a bad decision that I had given my seat at the assembly to Enoch, he allowed him continue to hold the position. In the days that followed, Cain had separate private meetings with each of the warring factions. The first meeting was with Elimelech and Asherah, and then days later, he met with Medora and her sons. Then finally he had a meeting with Seth. However, he refused to give audience to Enoch, even when Enoch requested to speak to him, and even with Aklima's intervention, Cain still refused to see or speak to his own son. I didn't know what the other meetings were about, but after a few days, Cain came to my house on an early morning to visit Eve and I. The last time he visited was to inform us of his decision to allow Abel leave Eden. So, it made me a little nervous, seeing him in our house that morning. Even as he sat in our house that day, I could see he was a different man from the one I remembered. He seemed drained of all his energy, and like a man who has dropped a heavy burden after a lifetime of carrying it around. He spent the whole day with us, without a word of why he had come. He ate with us, escorted me to my farm, and assisted his mother when she tended to her herbs, and visited the sick she was responsible for. All through that day, whenever I brought up any topic relating to the current situation in Eden, he brushed it off playfully and brought up something else for us to talk about, something unrelated. He talked about the old days mostly, how things were before the outsiders came into Eden, and the great memories we had as a family. Cain was never really one for nostalgia, but that day he was. He seemed less intense than he usually was, and he smiled a lot more now. This was the longest time he had spent with us since the mountain village's attack on him, and it brought back memories of the day before he left Eden and didn't return for 3 years. Memories of how he spent time with his brothers and sisters before he left, and suddenly I realized Cain was leaving us again. And I had this terrifying feeling within me that this time around he may never return. "I met him, you know," Cain said, his gaze on Eve as we had supper that night. "Your father, Samael." And suddenly the room goes silent, as Eve and I exchanged quick nervous glances. "He had a lot to say about me and about us. The past and the future." He paused and smiled pointedly before speaking again. "I must admit, he is quite a unique fellow. There is nothing he seemed not to know. I thought I had lived until I met him, the man who have seen 1,000 lifetimes." He paused again for a longer moment, and then turned his gaze to me. "This world is bigger and more complex than we know it to be. I thought I had changed things by creating Eden, but it turns out Abel and Morningstar were right. Eden and its people are just a smidge of the population of this world.